AJ Thompson with Black Ice Graphics out of Palmer, Alaska here. In this video, I'm going to show you the steps and techniques I use to create this cool skate deck. We got a Hear No Evil, See No Evil, Speak No Evil skull, all on top of an old school lowrider type graphic. I'm going to drop a comment giving you a link so you can get the vector files and follow along with this. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any future content. Thanks for watching. Okay, I've got my skate deck all prepped out and ready to go now. As you can see, it's a nice dark sealer. I ended up having to put down some high build just so I could get rid of the texture of the wood grains. So I started off by sealing it so I didn't have anything soaking into the wood, even though it had a kind of a clear coat type finish on it. It wasn't that high of quality. So I scuffed that, put a layer of sealer down, put my high build down, sanded that smooth, put another layer of sealer over that. I allowed it to dry for about 48 hours. Then I'm just scuffed it up again so I have a good solid tooth. So when I'm laying down my graphics and then taping back over them, I don't peel up any paint. Let's go ahead, get this cleaned up, and we'll lay out the Hear No Evil, See No Evil, Speak No Evil skull and graphics and get this ready for the next stage, which will be putting the silver over it. First off, you always want to start off with just a nice like wax and grease remover. Just do a light spray on it. Do not use what I'm about to use. My other towel is out of reach. You want to use a more lint-free towel, but this will work. There's the one I've got in range right now. And I'm going to tack rag it off anyway. Okay, you can see it's still a little shiny, but if I move air at it, it evaporates off really nice. Another thing, if you notice this thing's tippy and rocky really easy, I picked up these little paint stands at my local hardware store. I think it was a 10 or 12 pack for $7 or $8. But if I set these down nice and strategically here, and pick my skate back up and set it on it, now I've got a good solid foundation. I don't have to worry about it moving around on me while I'm trying to do the measurements and masks. Other thing you're going to need is a few good tapes. I've got a 1/4 inch fine line by FBS. FBS makes great products, different rigidities depending upon what you're trying to do. And then I've just got your standard masking tape, 2 inch and 3/4 inch, that all of us should have laying around. Nothing special. Gonna go ahead, take my cloth tape measure. I like using a cloth tape measure. You can get them at any fabric store because it conforms. There is a little bit of a curve to this. Makes it easier for measuring. And if I'm not mistaken, this is a 32 inch deck, so it's probably gonna be right around 32, 32 and a half, 32 and a half. And I wanna mark the center point. 16 and a 1/4. I'm just going to mark the 16. It doesn't have to be perfectly symmetrical unless you want it to be. Use my fine line tape for this. I want to use masking tape. And I'm just going to line up one edge of the tape with the center, and then do the same on this side. For this first part where I'm just laying down the Hear No Evil mask, I want it to be centered, but it does not have to be right down to the 16th of an inch because this image itself is not asymmetrical. So you just want to get it generally centered on the deck. The next graphic, the lowrider graphic that I'm going to put down after this, being a symmetrical pattern, I will measure out a lot more precisely, as you'll see when we get to that step. So, I have got this marked out so I can find centers really easily. Again, I'm going to eyeball it. I do want that center line to come out almost exactly on that center line. And we can eyeball and eyeball. Now I've got that laid down pretty good. And lock it in place with these so they don't accidentally move it. And I'm going to use the hinge method, which is probably one of the easiest methods for transferring a vinyl mask onto a semi-flat surface. There's a little bit of curve to this, but there's not enough to really mess with it. If this was like a motorcycle tank or something else with complex curves, I may try a little bit different way, starting in the center and working my way out. And the other thing is I would have more of a vinyl transfer paper as opposed to this just paper mask. But again, this image is pretty flat, so it's relatively easy to get it onto the surface. And you just fold it back, grab your edge, and slowly start revealing your image. The reason why I go slowly is occasionally some of your image will stick to the backing. If that does happen, just lay it back down, rub your finger over real quick to make sure that it stays onto the transfer tape. Now, this is important. When you're going to tear this off, you want to tear it to where it rolls to the back. And the reason why is, if you look real close here, you'll see this little fuzziness. By tearing it backwards, it put that fuzzy on my waist side instead of here. When I lay this back over, if that fuzzy was there, it would stick to that fuzzy and not come off and ruin your mask. So now I've got this area, looks fuzzy, but it's still got that little waxy film on it. And I'm going to take it out. I'm not going to start pushing it down here. I'm going to come out just a little bit. I'm going to start smoothing it out from the center. Like that. The reason why I didn't lock it down good and tight right up to that tear line is it's not a perfect straight tear. So I want a little bit of slack so I can fold under, get a hold of it, gently, slowly peel it all back. And same thing, start here and just let it kind of roll. This will get as few air bubbles as possible. There you go. Now smooth it down real good. You do want to kind of press it down a little bit. Roll it back. And I like to kind of roll back, that way it's not pulling directly straight up. Helps to keep my edges down and not lift anything I'm not wanting lifted. Really nice clean pull. I'm just gonna right around those edges again, just to make sure that they're down. You don't want anything bleeding. You want nice crispy lines for this particular project. There we go. Quick, simple, easy. Nothing hard about transferring vinyl down. Now I could have cut the lowrider graphic as a part of this and then just put down the one mask, and that would have been a little bit easier, but I wanted to keep the project so I could change the background, use the skulls, modify the width of the lowrider graphic if I was going to a fatter deck or not, narrower deck, without having to worry about changing the skull pattern or shape it for whatever I was putting it on if you're not putting this on a skate deck. So now I've got a series of back masks here. All it is the outline of the skull that you'll find in the files. You just go ahead and put these on. I do notice one thing that I forgot to weed out of this skull. There's a few spots like the cheekbones underneath the lower jaw that need to be weeded out. So take care of those before I put this back mask on. I'm just going to use a nice plastic razor blade here. Get them at Coast Airbrush, all over the place. But they're really nice to have because then you're not going to damage your substrate as long as you're gentle. Don't go all hog wild thinking it's a plastic and it won't damage anything, but just a little bit of finesse, and you can come in there and yank that out. Secondary line. I will fix that in a file before I get it to you guys though, but for some reason on this one there was a little bit of a double line on a few spots in this. That one. Don't forget these little cheap lines around. Just kind of get in there with your edge, peel them up. This is the same thing we're going to do when we're painting, is just grab an edge, and peel up, and do it sequential. I try to set most of my masks up to where I peel a piece off, put it, paint it, peel off, paint, and I don't have to back mask. Occasionally, no matter what colors or whatever you're working on, you do have to work with that, especially if you're working with lots of different colors that are close to each other, but you need a solid line. An example would be an American flag with the red and the blue. And this one should only have the one right here. Make sure you get your sharpest edge. They kind of go dull pretty quick because they're plastic. They're not designed to cut into the substrate. They're supposed to damage themselves before they do, so they dull up pretty quick. But, smooth your edges down just to make sure. I did forget to do a light tack over this. It's always a good idea before you put your mask on to do a light tack, especially considering I used that inferior paper towel I'm not supposed to use. Okay, now I've got that ready so I can peel off these individual little back masks. And the reason why I broke these down on this file was to make it a little bit easier. I did shrink them down just a tad. Interesting. Apparently I need to change my blade because it's not fully cut. Not super worried about it because, like I said, this is only so I don't end up with a lot of different layers over this, covering up my individual cuts in there. But I do want to line it up so it is covering that well. If it's inside the mask a little, that is good. If it's outside it a little bit, that's not so good. You might end up with little areas where it's not quite masked properly, like right there. So we'll grab a little plastic razor blade and come in here, grab that edge, and just modify it a little bit so it's covering that. Again, I'm not worried about any spots like this. The paint might get up under because the mask is still there, the nice flat one. This is, again, just so when I put down my layers of silver and candies while doing the lowrider graphic, I don't put a lot of layers over my cuts. Found my blade. Grab in here, make sure that these are out this time. It's a lot easier on the back end. Okay. Grab my next one. Oh, there's a couple more here. Peel that off. And line it up as best you can. I've cut these a little smaller so they will fit If that little jawline there is giving you issues and not lining up properly, you can cut it off because you have the mask under. So that's what I'm going to do here. Same thing here. I've got that position a little more, but I noticed that there are no individual cuts in there, so I don't have to worry about it. I don't like this little tab going in there. Just trim that a little bit more. Okay. Now I'm pushing real light so I don't cut through the back mask or the original mask. Just cutting that front one. That's just so I don't get tape buildup or paint buildup. Another thing that you may want to do is just kind of find like a shirt or something, pull off a little bit of that. You can see it fuzzy on there now. Pulls off a little bit of that tack, so when you're peeling this back up, it doesn't lift your from behind. Shouldn't, if you've got a decent mask. Don't use just regular old cheap vinyl to do this. You will not get it back up off of the other one. Paint mask, there's a bunch of them out there. This particular one is Avery for flat and semi-flat like this. Avery works really good. Got a decent tack to it so it doesn't come off and bleed under. You can kind of reposition it a little bit. Other ones out there by FBS, they're really good for doing it on curved surfaces and stuff like that, especially with that new blue. But like I said, this is a semi-flat surface, so the Avery works great, and it's not quite as expensive as your FBS or 3Ms out there. So, you don't really have to smooth that one down other than the edges. You just want it to keep it to where it's not going to cause massive paint buildup and you won't be able to see your lines later. Now we'll take this into the paint booth and I'm going to layer down a few coats of Createx medium aluminum and coarse aluminum mixed. I think I'm going to do 2 parts medium, 1 part coarse, and that's going to give me decent coverage with the medium, will give me some sparkle and pop for this lowrider graphic. We got our skulls masked out and we're ready to put down a layer of aluminum mix. You're going to grab yourself a decent tack rag and do a light tack just before this. Always a good idea to tack off your project just before you go to put paint down for the first coats. Depending upon what types of paints you're working with or what style you're doing, candies and stuff like that, tack ragging in between coats is also an option. For this one, not so much, because I'm going to lay down a kind of a tack coat or a light coat, allow that to flash off pretty good, and then I'm going to come in with normal medium wet coats to get coverage, allowing to get what we call hand slick, or just slightly tacky for the next coat. I'm not going to let it dry completely, and that gives me a good chemical bond as well as my first coat going down onto the substrate a little bit too thick. That's the mechanical bond. Let's go ahead and grab the spray gun over here and put that first coat on for you. LPH 80 minigun, best gun I want to make for this type of work. Go ahead and, since you've got aluminum, give it a little bit of a shake beforehand. Check your spray pattern on something, or that little pad over here that I can do that on. adjust that just a little bit. Too much. I'm gonna go about 1.5 turns back on my thing. There we go. Now, like I said, this first coat, I'm just gonna do a quick light pass, drop coat, tap coat. I've heard it called lots of little things. But I'm gonna go for a little bit of adhesion. Giving myself a nice overlap, about 60 to 70%. And as you can see, it's just not putting too much down at all. Part of that's because this is aluminum. Your metallics and stuff like that do not coat as well. But I've also got it choked back so I'm not putting lots on. Now, this is a drier coat, so the flash time for this one is pretty short, especially if you've got decent air movement in your booth. Another thing, you should be using a respirator while doing this, but since I'm talking to you on the camera, I don't want to be like, oh, but bro, there's something for people. I don't want to be vain. Back that fluid nozzle off, back that half again, get a little bit more flow this time. And again, overlapping pretty good, probably closer to a 75% overlap, so I don't get modeling. A little bit over a fist back, just laying down that coat. Around the edge here. Don't forget your edges. I'm going way past. I may come in and just do a nice little drop coat on the edges like that. I guess I'm going to do it. So now I allow that one to flash off for, like again, just periodically in some place that doesn't matter if you touch it. You can check it and see if it's tacky. That's still a little too wet for what I'm wanting. So I'll let this dry for about 5 minutes. Then we'll put the next coat on. Okay, I've checked it out. It's ready for the next coat. Go ahead and give your can a good shake. Anytime you're working with pearls or metallics or any effects paints that's going to have something in there, don't be afraid to give it a little bit of a shake. Don't go too violent because there is a hole in the top of your cup that allows air to come in. If you shake it too violently, you might spill paint out of it. But now I'm just going to go in and I'm going to do another coat. And this time, just to make sure I get a nice even layer, I'm going to change up my pass and do what's called a cross pass. And instead of going the same exact pattern I did last time, I'm going to change it up on the angle about 45 degrees. You can go the exact opposite direction, 90 degrees if you want. But yeah, cross coat when you're working with metallics, never a bad idea. Again, 60 to 70% overlapping, 2 turns back, about 4 to 5 inches away from my panel with a medium pan pattern. And just keep building layers until you get the coverage you want. I'm probably going to put 5 to 6 good layers on this because it is an aluminum over a dark color and your aluminums don't cover real well. If you're in the collision world painting and trying to break into the airbrush world, you already know that your metallics, your aluminums and stuff like that do not cover and are a bane. Fortunately, I'm not trying to blend the color. I just need to get an all even color, and I'll just keep putting layers on it until I get the coverage that I want. This 2.5 coat is not quite where I want to be. Like I said, I'm probably going to put 3 to 5 on. We'll be back in about 5 minutes after that tack's off. Put another coat on. Okay, we're back ready for the next coat. Again, give your can a little shake, nothing major. Kind of look at your coverage, make sure it's pretty uniform. It'll be a little hard to tell at this point how uniform because the transparency of the aluminum kind of showing a little darker on some spots, lighter in other, that's the curves. From what I can see here, it looks like I've got a pretty decent coverage, pretty even going. That'll be more apparent as you get more coats on though, so you want to make sure that you're putting your coats on nice and even with a good overlap. So just keep going until you get the coverage you're looking for. Nice overlap, even speed. Try and keep your distance the same. Follow the contour just a little bit. Come around here, change my angle off a little bit. Make it a little easier for me. I'm just blowing air at it right now to kind of speed up that tack process a little bit. I like the coverage here. I think it looks pretty good. I'm probably going to put one more good coat over it and then an orientation coat, and it'll be ready for the next step. Let it dry really good. Put my lowrider graphic down, and then we'll put a candy down. And so I think we're going to do 2 different color candies on this one. We're going for a green and blue, green outside, blue inside. And I'll show you how I achieve that. Okay guys, we're ready for that last pass, and then an orientation coat just to make sure everything's got a nice even coat on it. I really like how this is turning out. It's got a nice coarse bling to it that will really show up that classic lowrider feel to it. Same thing, I am going to change up the angle just a little bit, give it a good shake. Nice overlap, nice pace. Around that outside edge. Go around the other way so my hose does not get captured. And it's a good idea to be able to know how to spray with both hands in case you got a camera standing in the way. Now for that orientation coat, I'm going to lower my pressure just a little, like 1 to 2 psi. I'm going to come back a little ways, not much, just a little, and do a nice quick, kind of like that first one, but I'm going to be a little bit farther back and a little bit lower psi. 80% overlap. There we go. Nice little orientation coat, and what that's going to do is give me a nice even coat over the whole thing. Okay, so my deck is good and dry now. I don't have to worry about my color, my metallic getting messed up by my masking or lifting. I've got a good solid adhesion to it. I'm going to go ahead and use my Stabilo pencil here, measure out, give myself a nice centered area, mark it with some tape, and then apply the lowrider graphic. I want to make sure that that lowrider graphic is centered perfectly because it's very asymmetrical, and if I have it a little off, it'll look a little wonky. So let's go ahead and take some measurements and get this lowrider graphic on. Handy dandy cloth measure, it should be 32 and a half, so I want to come to 16 and a quarter. I'm going to use my Stabilo pencil, and I'm just going to kind of mark it like so. Now, if I remember correctly, this was an 8-inch wide deck. So make sure I'm on the black line over there and the black line over here, and then there is my center part. Okay, so now I'm going to just pull a full line of 3/4 masking tape, just because I know the masking tape has a nice straight edge. same across here. Okay, now I've got, oh, that's not quite straight. Make sure that that is good and straight. Now, I can't have this yellow masking tape down where I'm going to mask, but Chape's teeth, you can use it as a measuring device all the time. Now I've got out to the ends on both sides, so I can come in and just use that as a marker, and then put a little arrow there so I know what side I need to go to. Do the same over on this one. Put my little arrow. That's, again, just so I don't get confused when I'm laying down my mask on how I need to line that up. I no longer need this, it's gone, and as you can see I also did a tape test there. Now my paint's coming up, so I'm good there. Same for this one. Down here at this end, got a little piece of tape, put my indicator arrow, a little piece of tape, indicator arrow, lift this up, bam. Now I've got 4 spots, giving me a nice center. Grab my mask. As you can see, I've already put marks on it, so I can line this up. I'm going to trim it down a little bit more because it's super long, but that's nothing. These OmniGrid clear measuring things for quilters, you can get them at like Joann's, Michael's, quilt stores. They're quite handy for doing stuff like this because I can line it up on the edges, make sure I get a nice true 90-degree angle cut. Got it trimmed down, now I can place it a lot easier. Extend that just a little bit. That. Same on this one. By extending it, I got to make sure that I remember that I'm on the other side of the tape now. Okay, so now I'm centered top to bottom, centered left to right. Piece of tape. We can lock it down, make sure everything is good. And see if that feels about right. Always take your time in this process, making sure that you're good. am going to move that this way just a smidge. Center. Tape measure again. There we go. Now I can yank these little pieces of tape because I don't want them to get in my way. I've got that locked down. And just like before, come up, grab a piece of backing, and slowly remove your backing material. Tear, make sure you tear under. Down. There's a little bit of a curve to this surface, but not a huge, so you should be okay as long as you're working from the center out. Lift. Back. Notice I'm not getting the outside edge too much because there is a curve to it. So we're going like this, work that, and work that curve, and lay it all nice and smooth. Now I'm going to come in, I'm going to make sure all of my edges, just like before, are down. Now where it overlaps, make sure you push a little bit harder in there so it can't bleed up underneath that spot where it overlaps. Extra time will save you touch-ups later. You could even get a heat gun and kind of warm this up a little bit in those corners, but you got to be real careful doing that because the adhesive will stick a little bit more once you do that. Notice when I lift it right here, there's just a small spot where the mask came up, and I do not want that painted on. So I'll just throw a little bit of masking over that now. Double check down here. I am good. Now we're going to mix up a candy yellow. Let it set for a few minutes to emulsify completely. And then put a couple of coats down on this. When working with candies, it's not a bad idea to get yourself a spray out card and base coat it the color, and then do what's down a letdown card where you paint it, allow it to dry, put a piece of tape over it, and that tells you exactly how many coats you're going to need to achieve the look you're going for. I'm just going to wing it for this video and put probably 4 coats of yellow, allow that to dry, peel some masking, and then put my next candy color over that. Let's go ahead and move over to the booth. Okay, now I've got my LPH 80 cleaned out really good, and now I've loaded it up with Createx Candy 2.0 Lemon Yellow. I know I was going for a blue and green motif, but to save some backmasking, I'm going to go with yellow first, and then when I spray the blue over, it'll turn white. I leave unmasked yellow to a green that I'm looking for. I've got, again, about 1.5 pound turns out. Just double check that again. 1.5. Again, recommended PSI at 14. Light coats, and just slowly build up until I get the yellow I want. Once I get that, I will unmask the places that I want to be blue, lay down a couple coats of blue, unmask some more, a couple more coats of blue, and get this lowrider graphic looking pretty cool. Let's go ahead and start. Light coats, 60 to 70% overlap, 4 or 5 inches away. Nice smooth pass, just like you were doing the aluminum. Now the candy does dry a little bit faster, but not a lot. So I want to make sure I leave a good flash time between coats so I don't get it to pool up. With the yellows, I have found a lot if you put it on too heavy, it'll really seed really bad. So just go nice light coats and slowly build up until you get your color you deserve. Okay, we allowed that to flash off, dry pretty good. Like I said, it's not completely dry, just slightly tacky, ready for the next coat. I don't want it to be wet because then it won't flow out, it'll cool, cause issues, won't look right. But just a slight little tack, and I can test that anywhere where there's masking, so I know I'm going to pull that off. Just go ahead and do another coat. I'm probably going to do this 4 to 5 times. Let that one tack off, come back and repeat. Okay, so we're ready for our 3rd coat now. Let's go ahead and hammer it out. This time I'm going to do the cross hatch or cross coat pattern for it, just so I, again, don't end up with any modeling or hydrosetting. Starting to get a real nice yellow hue to this. Probably just 1 more coat. And then I'll allow that to dry real good. Unmask the areas that I want to be dark blue. Put a few coats of blue. Unmask the areas that I want to be light blue. Put a couple more coats. And that's going to change this yellow to a green color as well. Let's go ahead and let this side tack off now. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and put down 1 more coat, giving myself that nice good yellow base, and since I went with the lemon yellow, once I put the blue over it, and I went with the Korea blue, which is kind of a greenish blue anyway, I'm going to end up with a nice green color to offset my my Korea blue that I've got on the mask days, or will have on the mask days. Overflap, even, speed. Kind of the same thing as the last one. Just let it dry off. I'm liking the color it's coming out on the metallic background. I'm going to go ahead and clean this guy out real good. Load up my blue. By the time I'm done with that, probably will be time to come in and peel up my first layers, the areas that I want to be a darker blue. And then I'll lay down a couple coats, peel up some more, and I'll lighter blue. Okay, so we're ready for the next layer of candy, the blue. But I'm going to slowly sequential peel bits of these masks out because I want some of it to be dark blue and others to be light blue. And I want to coat the yellow color, making it a green color. So I've got a nice plastic razor blade here, and I've got some real fine-tipped tweezers to help weed this out without damaging any of the work I've already done. You want to be real careful with it. You're just going to get in there with the corner. Catch an edge. Okay, now I got a little bit of a lip. I'm just going to grab my little fine needle tip. And I'm going to go ahead and peel just the ones I want. What's still over here? Straight cut. Peel this off first. The spot that I had, I want that to turn green or to turn blue. You shouldn't have any problems with this part coming off. Just go nice and slow and watch what you're doing, so you don't have to worry about that. I may recut those and just re-put them in. That's the benefits of having a plotter, is if something didn't cut good, you can come back and fix it, no problem. Looks like that's what I'm going to have to do because I was working with a dull blade. It's okay. Just peel this off. plotter, isolate that little thing, cut it, put it back on. And take care of that. I'll go ahead and do all that off camera. We'll come back with the mask back in place and paint this up. Okay, we recut those vinyl pinstripe designs, placed them back in, and everything turned out good. I went ahead and finished weeding the parts that I wanted weeded for this first pass out. Now I'm just going to go ahead and get my Blue Candy 2.0. Make sure it's shaken up. Do a spray. A little test spray, make sure it's spraying good. And go ahead and start layering it in. Again, same as all the rest of them. Nice, smooth, good overlap, not too fast. Now I'm going to allow that to dry. Probably let it dry completely, pack rag it completely, and keep repeating until I get the desired colors I want for the upper layer. I'll unmask and paint, counting my layers. Okay, like I noticed there's a little bit of fuzzy in here. Probably just came off of me. That's where most of the dirt and stuff comes in. So I'm just going to do a light tack rag over the whole thing. Now that it's good and dry again. And keep going on. I do notice that there's a couple speckles in this in one spot, but it's okay because I was going to put textures in there to give it a little bit more of a low-riderish type feel. Some shadows inside the panels and stuff too. So we'll just keep moving forward. So that was pass number 2, and I'm really liking the color blue that's coming into those first those panels that I just unmasked. So now I'm going to shoot for a total of 5 coats of the candy. So the panels I have right now are darker than this. But when I get to my last 2, I will unmask the other panels, and they'll come up with this bluish teal color that I have now. And I think that's going to look real good with that green that's starting to form where I had the yellow down. Let's go ahead and let this flash off. We'll come back in about 5 minutes, do a light tack again, and then put another coat on and keep going. Okay, so we're back for the 3rd coat. Again, just a light, quick tack, just get any dust and thing, and go ahead and spray. I'm going to do the cross coat on this one, just to kind of even it up a little bit, but it looks like it's going pretty even now. Nice overlap, smooth. Pay attention to your lines. Let's go ahead and let this one flash off. We'll peel up those last 2 masked spots, put 2 more coats, maybe 3, most likely 2 more coats down, and it'll be done, ready to go paint the skulls. Okay, so we've got the first 3 coats of blue laid down. Turns that yellow into a nice kind of emerald green that works really well with the Carib blue. I'm going to come in here and grab plastic razor blade and tweezers. Get a start going. Cool. The last two panels in lowrider graphic, the masking out of those. So I can put 2 coats of the Carib Blue over that, and you'll end up with 4 different values on the lowrider graphics. We're going to have the green, the dark blue, the light blue, and then just silver pinstripe type effects. Of course, there'll be shading, a little bit of texture in some of them. And I think it's going to give a really cool lowrider feel with the image of the skulls in a monochromatic, I don't know, I'm thinking just a regular natural bone look. Just like the rest of them. Nice and smooth and even. Let the splash off, put the last coat of Carib Blue on, allow it to dry completely for a couple hours, and then peel up all the lowrider masking, and that'll have a, well no, it won't be peeling up the lowrider masking yet, because I'm going to use the pinstripe masking that's down there, so I can come in and back mask this, and throw a little bit of shading and texture in. Once that's done, then I'll remove the rest of the masking. Always got to think 2 steps ahead. The candy colors are good and dry now, so I can go ahead and back mask the graphics so I can create drop shadows within the different elements. To do that, I'm going to use clear vinyl transfer tape. You can use regular paper as well. The clear is just going to let me see a little bit better of what I'm doing. And I'm going to go ahead and put this over the whole thing. I'm going to use a nice sharp brand new X-Acto knife, cutting on top of the existing vinyl that's still there so I don't cut into the substrate. And then I'll be able to lift that off, put a little drop shadow type area, peel a little bit more off and add another drop shadow to it. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm just going to peel off enough of this here to cover the entire thing. A little bit more. Yeah. I generally prefer using just a regular old razor for this, but it's out of reach right now, so I'm using my X-Acto. And it's giving me issues because of the style blade I use. Here we go. Now, I'm just going to grab my squeegee, and it is pretty important to get this as wrinkle-free as possible on the areas you need it. Gently lift up any areas that aren't, and just smooth it down. You can do this with your hands too. I'm just using the squeegee. It lets me work the edges a little bit better. Now, I am going to use my hands, and where I need it to be really good and tight, I'm going to press those down good and tight. The plastic transfer tape is not as sticky or tacky as the paper tape, so you got to make sure it's good and stuck down. Okay, now like I said, brand new blade. It only has that one little cut on it, and I'm just going to do light pressure, and you can see I'm going to follow right on top of these lines here that are vinyl underneath that I wanted to keep silver. And I'm going to use the sharp part of the blade. I'm going to go ahead and show you the point. You don't want to be digging in like this. You want to lay it down like that. That's the sharpest part of the blade. And then you're just going to drag out. And I highly recommend just starting with one graphic at a time so you don't get lost. Try not to pick up your blade unless you have to. That way you don't have areas that are not cut. If you're ambidextrous, it'll make it better because you can draw the blade both directions relatively easy with your hands. I'm not ambidextrous. I've just done it enough that pulling straight lines like this, I can work. When I get to the corners, it gets a little bit more difficult. Okay, I kind of went off my spot there, so I'm going to go back and pick it up. I'm not super worried because that's the part I want to pull out. Actually, it's not. So I may have to redo that area with some tape. Hands again. Okay, that one is now cut. Now I'm going to come into the inside of this one. Grab that curve. If your blade starts to drag or does not feel sharp, go get another one. The blades are fractions of a penny. Your time, if you end up cutting too deep or damaging, fix it, is a lot more. Now this one I want to make sure that I'm going to stay right in the middle of that cut. So I don't have to recut this. There we go. You saw me cut that one and that one. I'll peel this out, put a drop shadow around it, and I can peel that one out and put a drop shadow around that one. But I'm going to go ahead and do the rest of these cuts off camera. You got an idea of how it needs to be done. You don't have to watch me for the next 10 minutes cutting all these out. Okay, so I went ahead and loaded up my little airbrush with the same color Carib Blue as we were using to do the candy coating yesterday. I've also got a few more drops of black in it. I don't want to go with just a straight black because it can create a hole real fast. But by going with that Carib Blue and then darkening up, I've got a nice color that will work really good for the shadows. And I'm going to go ahead and just outline the thing. I also decided to do my drop shadow sequential, so this will be the farthest back, the actual skate deck, then the first lowrider graphic, and then the next one. So I left all the masking on the large areas, and I'm just going to go around that and put a drop shadow. I want to make sure that they're nice and even, so I'll just take my time and make 2-3 passes. We'll see how it goes as we're painting. Test make sure everything's spraying good. Same as your large spray gun, even more important with the airbrush because it's a smaller nozzle and more likely to have problems. Just somewhere off to the side, you can do it over here on this. Just make sure everything is spraying properly, you got your air pressure and all that good. And then we'll go in here and adjust my lights a little bit so I can see. And just start working around the image. I'm going to get nice, even passes. I might even add a couple more drops of black to this, just to get it to get a little more shadow. We will go around the entire image with this just to see where that's at. Once you start, you don't want to adjust mid because then you'll end up with two different shades. So I am most definitely going to put a little bit more dark in there. But let me go ahead and finish this out and then I'll do that. I can see right here on the mask, it's not putting much shadow at all. And I wanted a little bit more than that. Since this was hand cut, not machine cut, I'm going to pull right here. Careful, because I'm going to try and lift it most likely. It's not a bad idea to have your razor blade with you, just in case you didn't get enough pressure or you get a little edge that's catching. Nice and slow so you can see what's happening. We're using a brand new sharp razor blade for this though. Okay, that one's good. Plastic razor blade. Since it's on the vinyl mask, I could have grabbed it with the blade and probably been okay, but I like to make sure. Bring on this side. Nice and slow. Cut good. Other spot is kind of not quite deep enough. Everything's smoothed down good. You don't want any overspray coming up underneath it. Since we're not doing release or texture or anything, I want it pretty clean. Okay. I'm spraying good again. And then just do the same thing, but I'm probably only going to do two, so it's not quite as dark as a shadow because this blue is lighter than that green.